Committee meeting. You know, most of you probably heard the news yesterday that a lobbyist that was in this room almost every day, Bill Brady, had died over the weekend. Oh, I wanted to say something yesterday, but knew I wouldn't get through it. So Bill and I were on literally opposite sides of the table on some issues, but one of the things that was abundantly clear, he came to the committee meetings to hear, to listen, and to take that information back to those that he represented. And what I appreciated about Bill is he was soft-spoken, polite, and he truly was a gentleman. He could disagree fiercely with every bone in his body with something that perhaps you believed and he didn't. But he sure didn't take it out on you. He calmly listened to you, and then he came back with his position. And, you know, we are at that point in the legislative session where emotions run high. There's all kinds of concerns that sand has slipped through the hourglass. I know how we're going to get this done. We are going to get the work done. And I think particularly in this committee, the way that we will get the best work done is if we do something that I know that Bill Brady always did, and that was focusing on, we're here for the kids, at least in his capacity when he was sitting here in this committee. So how we serve the kids, we all come with different perspectives on that. He understood that. But, you know, this is the third lobbyist, I would say, in this session that we have lost, and his was a significant loss. So just wanted to, for anyone that hadn't heard that, but for those that were wondering, why didn't we mention that yesterday? Yesterday, it was just too raw. It was too new. It was too much of a shock. And so I just felt it was appropriate that we start today's meeting recognizing that, you know, Bill usually sat, ironically, on our right side of the room, and he didn't believe in the power T where you need to be in the front row or in that center column. He was usually in the back, over to the side, but he was always listening attentively, and he would have questions afterward or at the start of the day. And I know for many he will be missed. So committee, we are now going to transition into our informational briefing. It's going to be on dyslexia curriculum. And I think we have, do we have one or two people that are here that are going to speak? We have one. Okay, so we are going to have Janine Phillips. She's the Executive Director of Fundamental Learning Center, Wichita, Kansas. So why are we talking about dyslexia? Why is there this focus? Well, part of it is because there was an agreement last year between the Board of Education and the Legislature that our goal, our focus was that by the time the kids hit third grade, they would be able to read. They would be able to read at grade level. Are we there yet? We're not. But with the help of training for our teachers and that learning that occurs in the classroom, we're going to get there, and we're all going to focus on making sure we get there for our kids. So Janine, thank you so much for being here today.
No, thank you, and I'm really sorry for your loss. That's always really hard when it's sudden and a really good person. So anyway, I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you. This is kind of a dream I've had for a long time to talk to this group. I believe it's been 7 years or so since I was last here, and I believe I did 14 years straight. So I've missed you guys a lot. Matter of fact, when I drove up, I couldn't find a parking spot, so in the garage, and of course it was kind of raining, and I had a heavy grade I was carrying. So anyway, I was like, I had totally forgotten how to get in the building, so I walk all the way around. So anyway, it's great to be back. I am here to talk about several things. We have been struggling in the state of Kansas significantly with teaching kids to read. And I don't know if you've listened to Emily Hanford sold a story. Have you heard? She's a reporter. She's been talking about how curriculum has been failing kids all across the country. So I have a clip, and I would like to start with Emily Hanford.
The same story from parents all over the country. State after state, I was calling parents, and here is the story that I heard. Our child started school, and we knew that something wasn't quite right. We went to the teacher, and the teacher said, "Don't worry, make sure you read lots of books to him, everything's gonna be fine." And it went on and on like this, sometimes for years. The parents saying, "Something's wrong here." The school saying, "Don't worry, it's gonna come together in time. We just gotta find him a book that he's interested in. We've gotta find him the right book. It'll all work out, it'll be magic." And here's what eventually happens if the family has time and money, especially money. They pay for private testing to try to figure out what is going on because they know something is. And this private testing usually costs thousands of dollars, many thousands. And then they might pay for some private tutoring, which can also add up very quickly to thousands of dollars. And they might even hire an educational consultant or an attorney or both to help them figure out what their child needs. That's thousands, even tens of thousands of dollars pretty fast. And this is all not just really expensive, it's exhausting, it's frustrating, it's really, really, really hard. And the parents begin to realize that their child might never get what he needs in school, or he's not going to get it fast enough, and time matters here. Because now their kid is 8 or 9 or maybe even 10 years old, and he's starting to hate school. And he's falling behind in other subjects because he can't read very well. And maybe he's beginning to act out in school. This is becoming a behavior problem. Or maybe it's manifesting as depression, anxiety, withdrawal, and maybe their child has actually said, "I want to kill myself." I have actually heard this from an alarming number of parents. Little kids who say they want to die because they can't read. And this is when, if they have the resources, the family might pull their child out of public school. And maybe they're going to homeschool the kid, or maybe the family figures out a way to come up with the tens of thousands of dollars that it can cost to send the child to a specialized private school for kids with reading issues, if there is a good private school nearby, and that is a very big if. So here's the situation that we're in this country. If you can come up with the money to pay for it, you can probably find a way for a struggling reader to be taught how to read. But if you don't have money, and your child is not learning to read in school, what do you do? The equity implications of this are truly stunning. If you're from a low or even a moderate income family, there is no safety net here. There is no backup if you're not being taught to read in school. As one mom put it to me, getting help for a struggling reader is a rich man's game. So we're talking about reading here, the basic, most fundamental skill, the foundation upon which all learning in school is built. That is a rich man's game. So how did this happen, and how is it allowed to continue? So this is when I decided to do another reporting project, surprise, surprise.
So I wanted to start with this clip for several reasons. Emily Hanford has a six-series podcast where she's a reporter. She has investigated nationally with the question, why have so many kids failed to learn to read over the course of the last 20, 30 years? So I showed this clip to our board of directors about 2 weeks ago, and one of my board members, who I knew was dyslexic, he looked at me after he saw the clip, and he said, I need to tell the group something. He said, I lay in my twin bed at 7 years of age, could not read, did not know why. Nobody knew why. They had taken me everywhere. And he said there was a loaded gun beside me. And he said, at 7 years of age, I thought about it. We were all stunned. Cody Rolfe is dyslexic. He still doesn't read to this day. He's genius. He is amazing, very successful entrepreneur, but he can't read. So, as I said, this is very, very personal. We hear these stories from parents all the time. So I appreciate getting to talk to you about dyslexia and about curricula and how we've got to start looking in a new direction. And I apologize, I woke up, I had no voice this morning, so I'm sorry. But I do have a PowerPoint, and I have given you a timeline for you to follow and some other goodies too. So again, Janine Phillips Fundamental Learning Center, Wichita, Kansas. My co-founder, thank you, and I started this organization 22 years ago, thanks. And we started it with a mission basically to serve the needs of dyslexic children who aren't recognized and empower them, their parents, and their teachers with specialized reading programs. All of our programs are Orton Gillingham based, and that's really important to remember. So I want to start with Kansas scores. I know all of you have seen Kansas scores. These are the NAEP scores. These scores are collected every other year. They're then posted the following year. NAEP scores, basically we've been following them since '98, which is where these scores start. Kansas is the top line. National average is the bottom line. Is that okay?
Madam Chair.
I'm sorry, Senator Dietrich?
We have no testimony. Is the PowerPoint?
It's not in yet.
Okay, thank you. Oh, we were just going to tell you we don't have your PowerPoint, but we're going to watch you.
Okay, that's fine. Okay, I'm sorry. Well, I got a call Friday, and I was babysitting 3 grandchildren all weekend, so my apologies. And I wasn't sure if this was testimony or not, so I apologize. I will send all of you my PowerPoint. So again, NAEP scores, Kansas is the top line, bottom line is the national average 4th grade reading. So at our center, we have watched with a focus on reading instruction, teacher training. We have watched these scores fall over the course of the last 20 years. So I kind of wanted to start with NAEP scores. I hope you've seen them. I hope you're aware of NAEP scores. I think most are in this room. When we disaggregate the data, it becomes obvious that we have a problem. These are the scores, basic or below. Basic means 2 years or more behind. when that's considered below proficiency scores. So basic means kids can't read. These are below proficiency scores. So 64% of the Caucasian population, African American population, 85%. And for years, I've been saying, when you look at an African American child, most of them, you can just think to yourself, they can't read. They make up the bulk of the basic scores in the state of Kansas, Hispanic children, and we haven't really seen that much change due to COVID. COVID's getting a lot of blame for this, but we saw these scores before COVID, not quite as bad as this, but very close. Poor children. And again, to Emily Hanford's point, it's very difficult for a parent to know how to teach a child how to read, which if a school can't, it does fall then on the parents thinking that it's their responsibility. Non-poor is basically the best score up there, and that's sitting at 60% relatively. So again, we have a problem. This is fourth grade. By the time a child leaves fourth grade, there isn't intervention for them. Kids have to be reading by fourth grade. So this is an early literacy problem that we had recognized many, many years ago. It really boils down to curriculum, and this isn't just in Kansas, this is across the country. Something went wrong years and years ago. And my partner, my teaching partner, Gretchen Andiel, actually wrote this part of this PowerPoint 20 years ago, focusing on reading wars. So that I kind of wanted to start with that with all of you. We've taught phonics. It started with phonics in the beginning in 1690, I can't read that far, the New England primer was published, and it established phonics as a way to teach children. We taught for about 100 years phonics before Noah Webster published the American Speller or the dictionary using the alphabetic principle, or in other words, phonics. 1830s McGuffey readers. I even remember my grandma had a copy of a McGuffey reader. It was phonics, introduced with really early children. We started with alphabet and phonetically taught them those sounds that matched. Shift to whole language. I will tell you, I'm dyslexic. I was a product of what the first whole language, which was known as Dick and Jane. How many had Dick and Jane? Yes. So Dick and Jane, I was born in 55. So by the time I entered first grade, would have been about 62. Dick and Jane have been around for a long, long time. Whole word reading, there were flashcards, little picture. Teacher flashed those cards, and for me, it looked like a bunch of squiggles and then a picture. So I knew what that card said by the picture, not the squiggles. So I always talk about Dick and Jane was the way most children were taught. I didn't learn to read with Dick and Jane. I went through first grade pretending. I went through second grade pretending. I got to third grade, and my dad was dean of business at Wichita State. I know for a fact he went to the education department and said, she can't read. What do I do to help her read? And I think they said, put her on your lap, pick a children's book and read it to her every day and point to the words. He did that. It was Cat in the Hat. That was the first book I hated to this day. He would read it. Within 2 weeks, I had memorized it, and then I had to read it every day. One day, I missed a word on about page 5. And he looked at me and he said, "Do you not know that word?" And he hit it hard. And I said, you know, I was panicking, trying to catch up where I was. So I kind of shook my head. So he flipped back and he said, and he hit the same word at the beginning of the book. He said, H-A-T spells hat. He flipped the page, H-A-T spells hat. Did it over and over. And I will tell you, it was finally by the last page where I said to myself, how stupid must I be not to have realized? I knew the alphabet. I just didn't know what those letters said. They didn't talk to me. So my dad called the 3rd grade teacher and he said, "Janine can't read." She said, "Yes, she can." He said, "No, she can't. She couldn't read the word hat." She said, "Well, luckily for you, I have a phonics program. I won't meet her after school." She took out this beautiful acrylic case of acrylic letters that had texture, and they were pastels. They were beautiful, and she taught me to feel the letters, to look at them, and then she told me the sounds those letters make. But she didn't do just that. She said to me, "What do you like to think about?" And I said, "Horses." So she bought simple little horse books to encourage me to read, but I had the phonics system by the time she bought those books, so I could read. By the end of my 3rd grade year, I was reading horse books, pretty good-sized horse books, probably 2nd grade, but I was reading. Had my dad not discovered that, had he not hired her to work with me after school, which I was really upset with him because all the other kids got to go play on the playground after school, and I had to sit with her. But she taught me to read. To this day, I'm not fast. To this day, I can read. I would rather watch the video than read, but I can't read, thank goodness. So go forward many years, and I am in my college class at Wichita State University in elementary ed. And it's the last night of class, and the professor is from the Northeast. It's reading practicum, and he said, "I'm going to give you an assessment. It's assessment of dyslexia." I had never heard the word in my entire life in education. Never had heard it. So I'm like, cool. So he had us turn it over, flip it over, and it was a timed test. And the timer went off. I looked up. Well, first I knew I was only halfway down. I looked up. Everybody else was done. So I flipped it over really quickly, and he said, "Let's talk about results." And he said, "And let's start with you." And he pointed right at me. So I knew he knew something I had never known, that I was dyslexic. So I approached him afterwards, and I said, "How did you know?" And he said, "Your writing. I could tell by your writing. When you talk about the things you know, nobody would know, but your writing is that of a 2nd grader." And here I was, ready to graduate elementary ed, thinking, great, what does this mean for me? So I talked to him after class, and I said, this, I didn't know. What do I do? He said, "Don't worry, you're going to be okay." So that was my introduction to dyslexia. Later, discovered I had a son who couldn't learn to read in kindergarten, recommended to retain him. 1st grade, miserable. We moved back to Wichita, where I was from. So I had some doctors, et cetera, help I could go to. and he was diagnosed profoundly dyslexic. Sent me to Dallas, Texas, because there was nothing in Wichita or in Kansas to help me know what to do for him. That's where I was introduced to Orton Gillingham program. Dr. Samuel Orton, it was not new. The Cooper, it was 1992 when I went to Dallas with nothing in Kansas to help me. And that was in Dallas where I found out about Samuel Orton, who he was a neuropsychologist, neuropathologist, who first identified dyslexia in young family, 3 boys in Iowa. He put together with Anna Gillingham a program that then it was very clinical. It was in hospitals designed to teach kids who were dyslexic to read. Not just that, they were assessed and diagnosed. It stayed very clinical all the way through about the early 1970s. And that's when Eli Cox, who worked out of Scottish Rite Hospital with a neurologist, wrote the Foundations of Literacy. This was the curriculum I was given. This is the curriculum I used with Cooper. Took me 3 years working with him every day, going through the scope and sequence, and a very specific phonics introduction, which started from the most common sound in the English language, which is I, to the least common sound, which was 82 sounds later, which was Q, U, qua. So every day I taught him a sound assemble. Every day from that point on, we would practice what we taught. And I will show you, I don't know if you've ever seen Orton Gillingham cards. This is the foundation of Orton Gillingham. Any program that's Orton Gillingham based, and there are 17 different programs today, Orton Gillingham based, have a system where we can drill with the kids very quickly the letters they've learned. And then these are the keywords and sounds. This is very old. This has been around for a very long time. So we go through all the sounds that the kids are taught, and they name a keyword and the letter combinations that go with that for spelling. So this is the essence of Orton Gillingham, and it's something that we have done for a very long time, obviously, under the methodology of phonics. So the next period that we look at is when basal readers came out, which this was overlapping at the time that whole language was starting to come back into vogue. Phonics was shoved out just before I went to Dallas, Texas. Actually, I did, when I was at Wichita State, I was a product of whole language. That's what had come through. That's what I learned to teach. That's what I knew I was failing kids with when I stepped into teaching. So again, what we know is for a bulk of the population, looking at a word, it doesn't compute. They've got to figure out how to decode words, and that's how it starts. So reading wars began in 1955. That was the year I was born. Starts with Why Johnny Can't Read by Rudolph Flesch. And it began the big debate on how is it best to teach kids to read. It was a scathing book about the fact that we had dropped any kind of phonics programs from our schools. 1965, National Institutes of Health take on the question, why are so many American children failing to learn to read. And that's where studies began to surface that 40% in 65 of American children were not learning to read. It was suspicioned, it was methodology that was adopted through curriculum that was failing the kids. So it was set out with these three questions that were studied nationally. How do children learn to read? Why do some children and adults have extreme difficulty? And how can we help most children learn? Mid-1970s until today, we've gone back and forth between whole language and phonics has been a constant debate. It was 1980s when Kenneth Goodman, who was the father of whole language, with Frank Smith, hypothesized that reading was natural as speaking and phonics rules were too complex and actually ridiculous to spend the time. Reading recovery surfaced with Mari Clay, and in Hanford's podcast, she spends a lot of time digging in, researching why reading recovery failed. Reading recovery was adopted by Emporia State University, and it was the main way teachers were taught for many, many years. In 1987, California adopted whole language. They had been up until that time, a phonics state, and went from the top 20% of the states in reading scores in 87 to being tied for last place in 1993. Today, whole language basically is still the way we're predominantly teaching. 1985, I was really blessed to have the opportunity to meet Dr. Reed Lyon. He was the designer of Bush's scaffold for No Child Left Behind with reading. He became head of NICHD studies on behavioral child behaviors and brought dyslexia into the question. So in 85, which was when my son Cooper was born, NICHD began studying extensively dyslexia. Under National Reading Panel Report, which was the report of the National Institute research, it was those changes, those emphasis on the kinds of skills we had to teach children if they were struggling to learn to read. And it was No Child Left Behind was signed into law in 2002. It survived barely 4 years before the attack from curriculum companies came about. As a matter of fact, several of the researchers were indicted for profiting on the research and the interventions they came up with. Basically, the National Reading Panel Report, I carried it here to Topeka for my very first presentation to the Department of Ed, and I held it up and I explained, this is a new roadmap that's available to the Department of Ed, and I understand it's been mailed to every Department of Ed. And one of the Department of Ed, it was actually the board members said, well, where is it? And kind of looked at me and I said, I don't know, it was mailed to you. And he looked around, he said, anybody seen it? And I said, it's like bright green. Sure that we can find it somewhere. Never found it. I got a call 6 weeks later from that board member who said, we found it. You didn't make it up. And I thought, no, I wouldn't have driven to Topeka to talk to the State Board of Ed and made that up. This book contained all the critical research, everything we knew back then that needed to be done. and basically very few states paid attention to it. It was wrapped into No Child Left Behind, every component. It was funded, and once again, it spoke Greek because it was talking phonics that educators around the country had not been acquainted with. So the big five were recognized. It's phonemic awareness key. That is key to all struggle, all kids' struggles, all adult struggles to learn to read is the sound embedded in words. In dad, d, can sound like can sound like b. And that's why we know that instruction is critical. Before we even hold up the letter and say, this is B and it says B, we've got to help kids identify those sounds and words. That's phonemic awareness. Phonics, the development of vocabulary from content, fluency, the practice of reading, and then finally, how that all ties into comprehension, which is our goal for reading. So children who can't read basically get more behind in vocabulary. They get further behind. They can't write. They can't spell. And it's that phonological basis to it. So 21st century whole language method starts to fade as a result of No Child being implemented. And there were millions of dollars behind it. Kansas returned millions of dollars. We just couldn't get it where we could get instruction changed, materials purchased, ways of thinking changed in time to hold on to that money. The new balanced literacy approach kind of came in after No Child Left Behind faded out, which was supposed to be an integration of phonics with whole language, looking at words, going back, saying it begins with an F, that's going to be a F sound. Can you guess? Look at the picture. Can you guess what that is? That was basically how I was instructed to teach at Wichita State University. There was no phonics. It was just, we did a lot of guessing. We did a lot of cute centers. We read a book with a lot of excitement. Yes.
We have a question that
Okay.
we address. So Senator Erickson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for being here.
Yeah.
Did I hear you say that with No Child Left Behind, there were millions of dollars to implement the 5 big ones we know, phonemic awareness, phonics?
Right.
Okay.
Yes.
And Kansas did not do that, and we sent the money back? Is that what I understood you to
Yes.
say? Why didn't we get that implemented? What was the obstacle or obstacles to implementing that?
There were many. We're speaking Greek to educators at this point in time. As a matter of fact, we had just done a big seminar on phonological awareness, and at the time, we had the superintendent, no, not superintendent, I'm sorry. Thank you. Yes, Commissioner. He had visited the center and he had left. He had gone back. We explained the big 5. He hadn't heard about the big 5. He knew they had some money. The next thing we heard was he had spoken to a teacher who had had our training, and he said, so I heard about phonological awareness, phonemic awareness. What do you know about that? I understand you had some training at Fundamental Learning Center. And she said, yeah, it's a sold book you can buy at the teacher's store. They took their money, they went out and bought this little thin phonological book and distributed it, and it was probably worth $800 or something for everybody to get a copy. Nobody knew how to use it. It was nobody understood this language. Nobody understood what was in the green book. It was, and actually we had a board member who was a lobbyist here in Topeka, and he was with me that day. And what we dubbed it was green Kool-Aid. and nobody could drink it because nobody understood it. It was incredibly sad. The state was targeted with monies to go into those areas that were struggling to the greatest degree. Dodge City was the primary focus at that time. Up by Kansas City, there was a focus, and certainly Wichita public school system, which has notoriously struggled. But it was because we were so ingrained in reading recovery or whole language. That's how our teachers were taught. And you guys, I've been through years and years and years of training, and I've trained thousands of teachers. It's a lot of work, and they have to learn a lot, and we give them exams, and they don't like that. And we watch them and we mentor them. It's a lot of work to change, and in all honesty, No Child Left Behind didn't give enough time to let that big change. I don't think anybody realized that in the center part of this country, we just didn't have that advanced research that was kind of hitting the coast at the time. So it was so frustrating for us to go through those years knowing our kids, our dyslexic kids, needed this instruction desperately. They still need it. We're still not there for sure. So when you listen to the podcast, and I hope you will, Lucy Calkins, who was the author of Balanced Literacy, which she kind of threw together. It's back to a whole language approach, where a little bit of phonics was thrown in there, but she designed her balanced literacy with no curriculum. So that, and threw it together finally in 3 weeks, realizing teachers needed curriculum. Fontes and Bennell have a leveled literacy program new that's basically Mari Clay's program, just rewritten. It's back to absolutely the 3 cueing. I don't know if you've heard about 3 cueing. It's taking a lot of it's getting a lot of attention, taking a lot of heat right now. And it's that system where you have the kids look at the picture, you have them read the words they can in the sentence, you cover the key word, and you say, what word do you think this is going to be? Teachers are taught how to do this. It's interesting, it's fun, it's kind of a game. It doesn't work, and we're beginning to see the dire results of it. You guys, we're absolutely in a crisis right now with these reading scores. So I was really glad to get this opportunity to talk with you all about this. So again, this PowerPoint, again, it's looking at guided reading. I read with a lot of energy in my voice to the kids, and I show them the words, and I show them where they stop, and I talk about how does the title relate to what's happening in my story, but there's no instruction of what we call decoding. So balanced literacy is, and as Emily Hanford talks about this, is basically whole language renamed. We've just gotten a full circle right back to where we've been many times before. So again, it's nothing but guessing, and kids who are good with vocabulary, kids who are good at listening to language, interpreting language, do pretty well at guessing. So it sounds like they're reading. But when we actually cover the picture, ask the children to read, they cannot read the text. So the facts about this whole thing is we've known for many years exactly what to do. Yes, yeah.
I have Senator Dietrich ask her question.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Chair. And Julie, you and I were on the dyslexia task
Yes.
force together, so thank you for all the
Yeah.
work that you
No,
brought to that.
I enjoyed
knowledge.
your
Yes, thank you.
leadership.
So you know we're moving towards structured literacy, right?
Yes,
So
I
that
do.
is a positive.
That's a positive.
There's a strong phonics piece
Yes.
in that with letters training.
Yes.
So do you believe we're headed in the right direction? I guess that's the question. I think
So,
we're headed in the right direction because we had Dr. Herford here yesterday.
yeah, I know, I saw that. That was awesome. I wish I could have come up 2 days in a row. That would have been fun. Yeah, absolutely. And I've known Louisa Bose for a very long time. She was part of the NIH studies when I first stepped into the world of dyslexia. She was working on her dissertation, and at the conferences, everybody flocked to her. We've embedded her work in our work for years and years. When I was on the task force, it came out of our committee's recommendation that pre-service teachers would really benefit from letters training. What we're hearing right now, we hear a lot, is teachers are, it's not the first time letters has gone through areas in the state. This is about the third time that it's kind of come through. What we are still hearing is this is great theory. They love it. We love when they come to us with the theory and philosophy. What it isn't is what do you do on Monday morning to bring all of this to your kids. So that's where we see people are very frustrated right now, and it would be so sad if this hurts, our progress again.
So thank you for that. So do you think the solution would be the pre-service piece with our colleges and universities, which is a little bit slower to move, but they're getting there? Or is it the professional development piece that our local districts are doing? I mean, what do you see from what you're hearing?
I appreciate these questions. Thank you.
That's okay, Madam Chair.
It's tough on in-service because they don't have the time to digest it like a college student does. If we could stay focused on pre-service with letters, giving them the foundation where then they get very strong and they're handed the curriculum and they understand they have the knowledge to pull out what they need to teach from the letters training, that's the first start. In service, we have seen it. We get texts to us from individuals who've had our training saying, I can't believe I'm having to sit through this again for 2 weeks. It really has been frustrating for a lot of the teachers. So again, I'm going to go back to my training, and I'll give you a few things that just kind of were dropped in my lap. One was a program itself, that alphabetic phonics program designed at Scottish Rite Hospital over the course of 10 years with a pediatric team, language specialists, physicians, educators, they all came together to study dyslexia. And that's really under the Bush administration. Barbara Bush brought those researchers from NICHD down to Texas, and that's exactly how Texas bloomed as a place to have dyslexia, or the place to go find out what to do for your child. So at Scottish Rite, and this is kind of part of the magic, what they did with both the curriculum that matched the research, and this came at the request of a child, was to put together a lesson strip that is posted in the room that allows the children to catch on to the structure that you're providing to the kids, and it guides us. So phonological awareness, this is actually learning letters, so it's about 5 minutes in each section. So that's what you write on your lesson plan, and that's what you work on. And the scope and sequence basically comes through the curriculum itself. The practice then of the Orton-Gillingham text happens here. The letter sound you've already shared with the kids. Then we go into the new learning section. This is where the new sound simple is taught, or what is a noun, or whatever new learning. We do cursive handwriting, so the letter that's taught that day, not just sound, not just simple, but also how to write that in cursive starting day one. So all of this builds over a month, 2 months. The foundation level, which is phonological awareness, and all the alphabet letters are established within the first 24 lessons. And most kids are very successful with it in first grade. So this structure, and when we talk structure, this is what absolutely came from the mouth of a babe, that this would help. So I believe it was under research for 5 years before a child finally said, could we see this, on a strip? So part of what we do is kids move this. They get up, they move a little clip down, so everybody's following along, and this then designs your lesson. It's a 16-minute lesson. It's to happen every day. And I will tell you, and I wanted to show this to you because my huge concern is as we move forward, thinking that teachers are ready to step in and deal with a classroom of 20 to 25 kids and be able to deal with those kids who are picking this up fast, which is going to improve with letters training. It is, for sure. But it's going to be the dyslexics who, once again, need these many more repetitions that are going to be left out. That is where MTSS was originally supposed to help, is be an intense intervention place for kids to go. So again, it's, in my mind, we're needing to really make sure that we're not throwing the baby out with the bathwater again, and really think carefully through what does this plan look like? Because, dyslexia affects 1 in 5. That's 20% of our population. And right now, they are really, really at the bottom of the barrel.
Senator Erickson has a question for you.
Yes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't know if it's possible to go back to a slide you showed previously, but it was the 4th grade reading
Yes.
percent of 4th grade students that, and you broke it out by demographics.
Right. Right.
I just have a very simple but maybe difficult question. Why? Decades and decades and decades of reading research. All of the time, effort, energy, money we put in it. And I will say my personal opinion, we have no greater job in early education than to teach children to read. To read.
Thank you.
Why? Why are 85% of our Black students, and why? What is the rationale, and shame on us for that result? Thank you.
We have thought reading was a visual issue, exercise all these years. All these years, look at this word, tell me what it says. Look at this letter, tell me what it is. I told you I could name the letter H-A-T. What I didn't know were those sounds. Phonological awareness affects English as a second language because the sounds are different. African American dialect is why phonological awareness is affecting reading. Statistics right now, the sounds in the language are different, the way they're heard in the home. I can teach, and I have a slide at the end of this. We did a study clear back in '09 with Barry Downing, and he funded a for 259, he funded intervention training for all special ed teachers. We went into 13 schools. We trained teachers. They pulled the kids, had to be in the bottom 10th percentile. I went back to Barry, and I said, Barry, I don't know if our training is going to change. I mean, for the bottom 10th, that is so low. So all the teachers pulled their kids. They were working. I went out to look. 98% in this study, it was over 120 kids were Black children in first grade, kindergarten, first grade, second grade, and third grade. I went back to Barry and I said, Barry, I don't know if a program that's for dyslexic kids is going to work for this group. He said, do it. Let's just see. And it was amazing what happened in 14 weeks with teaching. This is the letter P, and it says P. And we had kids argue. We'd flash pictures, and it was a cold, snowy March day, and the teacher had a picture of a sled, and she said, this is a picture of a sled. Let me show you the sounds, sled. Now do it with me. And I was there, and this little kid burst out laughing, and he said, everybody knows it's not sled, it's sled. You don't go sledding, you go sledding. And we were all of us instructors who have had years of phonological, I had never thought, but those are the sounds that are changed in the African American dialect are usually those end sounds. So again, he could read sled, but he didn't get the picture of a sled in his head. So that changed everything we've done since when we're educating children through phonological awareness. So it's key, and that's exactly what's going on. Teachers don't know. I mean, you guys, we spend days teaching teachers how to pronounce sounds. It was great to see. I'm sorry. I know I've run way over, and I'll come back if you'd like for me to.
Absolutely out of time.
I know you are.
So we appreciate
No,
your work
I
and sharing your
appreciate
knowledge with
this
us.
too.
One thing that would be helpful if you could give us some feedback as to where our universities, you're there in Wichita, where our universities, start with Wichita State, are in making that transformation so that they are actually teaching those elementary ed teachers. So they're not having to graduate, be in the classroom, and then relearn. If you could give us a time frame for how quickly you think they will be making that transition, that would be helpful.
I'll be happy to do that. I'm working with the Board of Regents, kind of beginning to look at what does that plan look like. So I'll be delighted to do that. And our new building, I don't know if you've heard, we are building a new building on the east side of Wichita, and it's to the point I'm giving tours, and I would love to invite anybody down, everybody in this room is invited. Give me a call, and I'd be happy to give you a tour. It's kind of muddy right now, but as it dries up, I would love to invite all of you. So, thank you very
Committee meeting
much.
adjourned.